May you this day be blessed. Hi there, I'm Sister Catherine Herms, and thank you for joining me today as we explore the love that is the heart of the world and the work of the heart that helps us become this love and discover it in the world so that all the world becomes to us like the miraculous burning bush. We have been invisibly stamped with the signature, the seal of the God who bends over us with such tenderness. I call this work of the heart work. Heart work exists because people realize they've come to a place in their life where they want spiritual direction. Maybe there are too many options, or maybe there seems to be no options at all. Perhaps they have new eyes to see, or perhaps they're longing for this new sight. Some have touched the sunrise within their soul and want more. Others are longing for this spiritual gift. Sometimes our hearts are filled with nagging questions that run like background music in our life. Do I matter to God? Does God see me? Does God hear me? Does God get what's happening to me and what it means? In heart work, we answer the essential question: who am I now in this situation of my life and in these relationships? To learn more about heart work and what God has led me to do in the world, or just to stay in touch, visit touchingthesunrise.com. Hello, I'm here today with Jeannette, a good friend of mine. We're here for a conversation. Actually, it's an interesting conversation because I shared with her like a passage from my own journal, and I just asked if we could just have a conversation about some of the ideas that are in there, or what it sparked in her and myself as we meditated on that little section of my journal. I, like many of you, have been grappling with my own feelings in these past months. Our families, situations in the world, what we're seeing on the news, what we're seeing on our social media feeds, family, all these things. And one day I dropped into with all of that in my heart, and I looked at God, and He just said simply, "I am acting." And I said, "You were acting? Can I just write that down for you?" I am acting. God is acting. No, not really. But He did. I really heard those words in my heart very early on in the pandemic, actually. I am acting. I'm acting in the midst of this. And I've held on to those words through the weeks and now through the months. And what I will eventually share from my journal is when I stopped and really reflected on what that meant, at least for me. And I have to just say a little thing here. And then, but I was looking a little bit last night at some of the conspiracy theories. A friend had come up and told me this terrible thing that was going to happen. And so in the middle of the night, when I couldn't sleep, being so terrified, I looked it up and just said, this is a conspiracy theory. So that helped me go to sleep. But as I was reflecting again on this journal piece, it's almost like this is, I don't know if you can say this, Jeannette, like a divine conspiracy theory, or?
Well, I would stop you there, sister, because I think that the fact of saying theory means that it's something that we've made up. We make up theories and we test them out, and sometimes they turn out to be true and sometimes they don't. Whereas with God, it is always truth. So I would hesitate to say divine conspiracy theory, but I would say divine conspiracy, because a conspiracy is this whole idea of working towards something. And I think that's what God is doing in us. Not coming up with maybe this crazy thing happened or that crazy thing happened for this other reason, but the only real reason is God, and that God is acting.
Oh, that's so beautiful. You know what that makes me reminds me of, and actually you were the one who told me this a couple years ago. Carol Houselander.
Ah, yes.
She lived from 1901 to 1954, and she lived in London all of her life. She was a British lay Roman Catholic. She was an artist, mystic, a poet, and a spiritual teacher who helped many people in those years. But when she was 17, excuse me, her mother sent her out on an errand. And on her way to the street vendor to obtain what her mother wanted, she happened to look up, and she reports that what she saw there was almost like a huge Russian icon that was spread across the entire sky above her. And the icon was the icon of Christ crucified, lifted up on the cross, yet looking down, almost, she says, almost brooding over the world. And shortly after that, she read in a newspaper an article about the assassination of the Russian Tsar Nicholas II. And the face that she saw in that article, which was the face of Nicholas II, was the face that she saw spread out over the sky as the crucified Christ. And that's just one of many different, mystical or quasi-mystical experiences people have had through the years, where they experience this way in which God is present to his people, especially during these immense times of suffering.
Yeah, you have to love that sense of this overarching vision that really is enfolding the whole world, is enfolding all of humanity in God's protection, in God's love, and in God's presence.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So the other thing about Carol Houselander, although I shouldn't say the other thing, there are many, many, many wonderful things about Carol Houselander. And if anyone out there has not read her, I truly urge you to do so. But what she taught me, just in such a simply eloquent way, is to see Christ in everyone. She recounts a story of being on the subway in London at rush hour. And if anyone's ever been on a subway at rush hour in any city, you know that you're not exactly filled with warm, fuzzy feelings toward your fellow human beings. It's a difficult situation. And as she was in this subway, she looked around and she saw Christ in absolutely every person in that subway car. And that sense stayed with her. That was this gift that was given to her in that moment in that subway car, that she could see Christ in everyone. And she saw him simultaneously living and rejoicing and suffering and dying in every single human being. And that really that's the unity of life in Christ. And as she went forward after that, she continued to see him. She continued to look on people from all walks of life, all sorts of people, even people she didn't particularly like, and be able to see Christ in them. And that is such an incredible gift. And honestly, it's one I pray for every day of my life, because I can tend to be impatient with people, and I can tend to dismiss people's opinions when they're different from mine. And to be able to take a step back from that and say, but Christ is here in this person, it really did change my life. Changing that perspective.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me also of Thomas Merton in Louisville.
Yes.
On Fifth and Walnut. I've told this story several times. But I think he had gone to the doctor, and he was standing there in the corner downtown. And he also had just this clarity of insight. It was almost like these moments, many of us have had them, these moments when almost like the curtain gets pulled aside, and we see what's truly happening. And as he looked at all the people in Louisville on that corner of that street that night, he saw that every single person carried within themselves this little spark of the glory of God. He called it the virgin point, and we can talk about that forever at another time. But this little spark that everyone had within them, as a child of God, as a human being. And I think that also speaks to what Carol Houselander was saying there too. And yeah, so this divine conspiracy, this divine way in which God is here, but is almost cloaked, because, as Carol Houselander also said, God is everywhere, but our faith is so dim. The idea of heaven is just so remote in the world today, but God is everywhere. So getting back to my little reflection from my journal,
Yes.
God said, I am acting. I am at work here. So my poem goes, I am acting. Within what breaks, I am vast abyss. Within the falling, I am depthless depth. In the emptying, I am the silence. Stop. Shed your mind's unconscious gossip and still your heart. Touch your forehead to the earth, my carpet, a floral carpet, crimson red, on which you bumble and tumble in my glory.
Yeah.
The beginning part of it still speaks to me. Within what breaks, I am vast abyss. So often we think of, I'm going to pray to God and he's going to fix it, or take it away, or make everything okay. What God seems to be saying in this inspiration, small inspiration that I had, was that God is bigger than all of this. He's bigger than my pain. He's present to it. So when things break, they fall from gravity, they fall into space. And he's saying, when you fall, I am vast abyss. I can catch you. Yeah. I can hold you. You can only fall into me and into my presence and into my love. Within the falling, I am depthless depth. I have no bottom. I have no depth. I am deep. Corrie ten Boom, no matter what pain it is, I am deeper still. Yes. God is deeper still. And I think when we're living today in all that we're living, we feel down. We feel in the depths, we say. We feel lost. We feel like we don't know where we're going or what's going to happen. And in a sense, God says to us, I am an abyss. I am death. I will catch you. I will hold you. Yes, things are falling, but I am here and present and holding you. In the emptying, and I feel I'm being emptied out of so many things in my own life, walking through this process. And maybe some of our listeners are too. In this emptying experience, I am the silence, because when we're filled with whatever it is, money, things, gadgets, people, noise, social media, whatever it is, when we're filled, parties, entertainment, when we're filled with all these things, we are in a sense escaping that inner silence where God is. And Carol Houselander again says, God speaks silently. He speaks in your heart. So in the emptying, I am the silence. Like, don't be afraid, Catherine, God is saying to me. Don't be afraid of the emptying. Don't be afraid of the silence, because I am the silence, silenter still, if you can break grammar rules, but I am the silence deeper still. I don't know how that inspired you. Or
what inspired me particularly in that passage is where you wrote, shed your mind's unconscious gossip and still your heart. Because I think that in any time of crisis, and we're in a time of crisis now, but humanity is almost always, I think, in a time of crisis of one sort or another, we listen to a lot of voices, and to be able to still them and to listen to the one voice with a capital V that is God's voice is an act of will. It is not something that comes naturally, at least not to people who aren't saints. It certainly doesn't come naturally to me. I've got my brain, I lie down at night and my brain just goes round and round and round. And I have to be the one to say, all right, get rid of the day's gossip, get rid of that unconscious gossip that's just still in there, and still your heart. And then in the silence, you can encounter God.
Mm-hmm. And actually, Jeanette, there's such a blessing when we do make that leap, that willingness to stop, that willingness almost to allow ourselves to be neutral, that willingness to have the courage to accept what's going on, to be with and accompany what's happening. As you were saying, before we reach that point, we can find ourselves just emotionally driven. Our perceptions get clouded by these emotions that are running many times in this realm that's unconscious even to us, because we have to realize, and we all do, that all these things that are happening around us and to us right now are different than what normally happens to us. But so they're going to be tapping into memories, experiences way back in our life that maybe we haven't had the chance to really look at, to heal. And so when we don't stop, we can find ourselves running on emotion, prone to conflict and to strife. We can have this negative view of the world and the self, but when we do take that leap, we find that we're more tranquil. We realize that everything that's going on is more than I can know. And it's more than I can figure out, come to, be wise about, hold on my own. In one sense, you're saying to be focused more on God's word, on God's eyes, on God's revelation, than on what scares and angers us.
Right.
When we're more emotionally neutral too, we're more able to see context and paradigm and paradox and all of that opening up. As even the beginning, God, I am vast abyss, I am deaf, I am silence. And when we open up, when the clouds of perception over our eyes are kind of cleared out, and we can see things more for what's really happening, we allow ourselves to be more emotionally neutral, and our emotionality, in a sense, kind of goes into the background. We still feel things, but that driving emotion that runs our thoughts, or our mouth, or our fingers on the keyboard if we're commenting, it tends to go into the back, and we can be more reasonable and more wise by looking at the whole context of what's going on.
Right. And I think that your words are wise in the sense that when you talk about I am the silence, that these things can only happen in a context of silence. You have to make your brain be quiet. You have to make your emotions be quiet. You have to be open. One of the people that I know of who's written eloquently of silence is, of course, Elie Wiesel, who was an Auschwitz survivor and a phenomenal writer, humanitarian, philosopher, all sorts of things. And what he says is that silence is the only appropriate response to something as horrible as Auschwitz. And in a sense, things like that, not just horrible things, but wonderful things, and everything in the spectrum in between, are things that we experience that are beyond our vocabulary. And we try to put them into our vocabulary. We try to make them fit our narrow constraints and concepts of what life is. And when you write here so beautifully, in the emptying, I am the silence. To me, that's echoing Rizal. It's echoing all these people who have said that we're not dreaming big enough, we're not looking big enough, because God is so much more than all the things that we can chatter about.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I know there's a poem too by George Herbert called "The Flower."
Oh, I love George Herbert.
Yeah. On retreat, I found this little snippet out of a poem in a book that just spoke to me. I recently made retreat, so I'm carrying all the past months in my heart and trying to make sense of my own life. And the two lines were, "Who could have thought my shriveled heart could have recovered greennesse?" And when we take that step back into silence, it's almost the only way. Instead of trying to figure it out with our own language, I love the way you said that. When we step back into silence to hear the language of God, our hearts wake up. Their flowers bent over from the storm begin to stand up straight and to face the sun and to be beautiful once again and to have life once again. And that's kind of how I felt my heart was, what was happening to my heart during my retreat. It was rediscovering greennesse.
And that's such a beautiful passage. It truly is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to use a totally secular image, but if you think of the story of Cinderella and how the prince was trying to fit the stepsisters' feet into the shoe that they couldn't fit into, and they kept trying, they kept pushing, they kept trying to make it fit. And that's what we tend to do with God sometimes. Like, I've got my ideas about the way the world should be, and I'm going to make them fit into my religion and my faith and my God, rather than saying, oh Lord, what is it that would be green in me, that you would like to see grow, that you would like to see develop?
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you've captured it beautifully, and Herbert's captured it beautifully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a beautiful prayer. What do you want to see green in me? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because God is acting in each of us. And just to bring this conversation down as we're coming near the end to real life, everyday life. We've been talking about huge issues and huge reflexive inspirations. But again, Carol Houselander in the book The Read of God talks about just the very simple ways in which we can be Christ in the world today. And she writes, we could scrub the floor for a tired friend, or dress a wound for a patient in a hospital, or lay the table and wash up for the family. But we shall not do it in martyr spirit, or with that worse spirit of self-congratulations, of feeling that we are making ourselves more perfect, more unselfish, more positively kind. We shall do it just for one thing, that our hands make Christ's hands in our life, that our service may let Christ serve through us, that our patience may bring Christ's patience back to the world. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. She is truly amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that we can't talk about all of this without. I mean, I love the sense of oh God, what do you want to see green in me, and how can I grow? But one of the ways that we grow, and one of the ways that we try not to look at because we don't like it, is the problem of pain, of being in pain, and how pain can be a way of growing. One of my other favorite authors, as you know, is C.S. Lewis. And he actually has a book called The Problem of Pain. And in it, he wrote one of his most famous lines, which is, Pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks to us in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And that's one of the things that I know I certainly do, and I think a lot of people do, is if something is painful somehow for us, it's wrong, and we push it away, rather than thinking, this is a way that God's really trying to get my attention. He hasn't been able to get my attention in other ways. He's given me some nice things to look at, and I'm still not paying attention. So here it is. Listen to me. And I think that that's part of the equation that we kind of try to avoid, because of course we want to avoid pain. No one goes looking for pain, but it is part of life, and and God is with us in the pain as well as in the pleasure.
That idea of pain makes me think also of children, and the end of this little reflection, prayerful reflection, also kind of leads us into that space of Jesus telling us we need to be like little children. So the words here are, touch your forehead to the earth. My carpet, a floral carpet, crimson red, on which you bumble and tumble. The sense of children playing.
Right.
To be, and really when the worst things are happening, they can still play. Because they have this utmost trust that the adults are taking care of it. That somehow they will be taken care of. They know that they are powerless, that they are not able to solve the problem, that they are not able to surmount the situation, that they don't know the answer, but they know that they have need, and that they know that they are totally being held, loved, and cared for by the adults. And so really, it's a call, I think, in the midst of all this very serious situation, to also bumble and tumble and play and in trust with God. And I think C.S. Lewis also was someone who was able to carry that burden lightly, to find joy in the midst of his sorrow.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Good. So I'm really grateful we had this conversation. It's been helpful for me.
I always enjoy talking with you, sister.
Oh, good. And I'm really wishing the best to all of our listeners. We're praying for you, and we wish you all childhood and the presence of God in a new sense in your lives. Thank you, and God bless you.
God bless.
Sometimes we can feel as though we were lost in a deep forest where no clear paths are visible. A blend of spiritual guidance, mentorship, and counseling, the HeartWork community is a place where you learn to explore, love, open, and nourish the paradise of your heart, your deep heart, where God is already dwelling within you. You will discover that though you waited for light to appear from outside, the paths of light are imprinted in your heart, where the Trinity abides, and we learn to walk them through the valleys and mountaintops of lived experience. HeartWork is a process of accompaniment that honors your story, creates a space in which you can safely explore what is happening with you, gain the tools to come home to your heart, where the Trinity is already at work, be recreated by love, and set out again. To learn more about HeartWork and what God has led me to do in the world, or just to stay in touch, visit touchingthesunrise.com.